that currently we're looking at revision 1.6 on this document, on this page. At what time it was done, who made that change, and here you can go back in time. It only shows the last 3 revisions. If you click on more, you can go back to the first revision. Then also all file attachments are under revision control. So if you click on action, you will see the list of all versions of GNU patch in case there's more than one version. The version control is something very important for corporations, so it leaves a complete audit trail for everything that you do in the system. Then there's also access control. So you can define a group. There's one page called Twiki groups that lists all groups that are defined in the system. And one example, the Twiki admin group page has mainly 2 important lines or bullets. One is a set group that defines who the members are of the group. And then set allow topic change that is telling you you're defining who is allowed to make changes to that page. In other words, who is allowed to invite other folks. In this example here, the page name is Twiki admin group, and you're saying it's a Twiki admin group that can invite other people. That means everybody in this list can invite other folks. Then the second step is that you impose some kind of access restriction based on those groups. And you can do that on a per page level or also on a web level. Important to consider is that usually soft security works. What I mean by soft security is just rely on the version control of the system. There are only a few cases where you actually do need version control, access restrictions. Those cases are, for example, engineering content that needs to be shielded from the sales front. But basically, if a person can look at the content, that person should be able to change the content. That sounds like an invitation for chaos. It's kind of strange that that you have an open system like this, but in reality it works very well. It works very well in the corporation, like in an intranet. There's enough peer pressure to post only content that makes sense. And if somebody posts content that doesn't make sense, well, there's an edit button. Anybody can fix it on the spot. Right? At an example at twiki.org, we have several thousand page changes per month, and we have very few problems. So it happens maybe once every 2 months or so that somebody deletes the page content, basically just deletes the content and saves it, but it's not gone. It's just like one version back, and I as the administrator can roll back a version and then everything is fixed. So the Twiki.org website, the Twiki on Twiki.org and other public websites, they're usually world writable, and it works well. So it must work on the internet. Okay, preferences. So the system has 3 levels of preferences: site level, on the web level, and user level. Limitations of Twiki. So it's purely web-based. That means, so with this HTML form, it's not really, you can't really do big edits with an HTML editor. I mean, with a text box. So they're usually quite primitive. Some browsers allow you to launch an editor, your preferred editor. They're usually text-based browsers. There's also a plugin on the Twiki.org website that I think it's called Power Edit plugin. That is basically a Java applet that's an HTML WYSIWYG type editor. I haven't tried it out. So editing is not WYSIWYG. Nevertheless, it's fairly easy to create good-looking text. There is a markup that you need to learn. It doesn't take too much time to learn that. So, for example, you type make text bold in asterisks and fixed, just in the equal signs. And if you look at the page, if you save the page, you will see it in bold and fixed font. And then there is another syntax to make bullets, headings, and tables, and so on. So resources to learn. On the Twiki installation, you have a welcome guest page that goes through these most important steps. I usually point folks first to there. One of the steps is to register. It's also on the welcome guest page. So you need to set up your own account. And then it's also, you can follow the tutorial that takes maybe 20 minutes to go through.
Why don't you mention too, what information is really required to register? You don't need to know their wife's name or their mother's maiden name or anything like that.
So the registration page can be customized. We are looking now at on the Twiki.org website. So it's this form here. So what is actually required is, the only thing that is really required is email address and your wiki. And all the other one, well, and plus also password if you're if you let the system manage passwords. In many corporate environments, you want to authenticate against the NIST databases so that users don't need to track more than one password. So that's a web server setup question. And Twiki supports both, like internal keeping track of user account with passwords or over some external means like NIST. Or LDAP. Or LDAP, yeah. Okay. Now let's look at some advanced features. So we have skins with variables, forms, formatted search, plugins with an API. Skins basically change the look and feel of a page, but the page content itself doesn't change. So that's basically meant as a separation of presentation and content. So typically in a corporate environment, you want to create a skin that mimics your own intranet, so that employees feel at home immediately. The default Twiki skin or template is kind of a bare bone, very functional look. It's nothing fancy. So usually corporations create their own skin. So there are many skins for download. I think latest count is about 15. So you can either download, install a skin, or create your own skin. Then we have variables. Variables are something like system variables in Windows or Unix. For example, %red% will start the text to appear in red. Then there are variables that require some parameters that will give you the system time in a certain format, and there are plenty of variables to choose from. There are also variables that are preferences variables. Again, it's site level that can be overloaded by web level, which can be overloaded by user level. You also can customize the variables or also create additional variables, like preferences variables. Then one particular type of variable is the server-side include. It's a standard server feature. Then maybe mostly interesting to build web applications are Twiki forms. So think of Twiki forms kind of a database, but it's not like a regular database with relational database with tables and so on. So it's basically everything you're defining as a Twiki page. So the first step is you're defining a topic or a web page, in other words, that defines the form, how a form should look like. So here in this, you have a pick list, you have checkboxes, you could have edit fields and so on. So at first you're defining what kind of form you have. Second step is that then, once you have it defined, you're attaching a form to a page. Doing so, that's in database speak, it's like a page with a form attached to it. It's like a table row in a relational database. And the key point here is that if you look at a page, you will see at the bottom just the form that you have been defined with these values. But when you edit the page, on top you will have this big edit box that we have seen just before, and at the bottom you have this the form here, the web form in edit mode. Okay, so that's a way to give structure to unstructured data. Then the counterpart of this is formatted search. So now we want to do some kind of reporting. For this we have another variable called %search that accepts many different parameters. And with this you can do all kind of reporting. Now let's look at an example. Meeting minutes application. So that's a group has weekly meetings. We have a system here where we have a template, just like a template that should be used for each meeting minute to have a common look. Also, we've already filled in the default attendees. Then we have here a create button. So now I'm creating a new meeting minute. So it will use this form, this template. My name, Grant Bowman or Grant Bow? Bow at Twiki, okay. So then basically just write your meeting minutes here and preview the changes and save the changes, and you're basically done. So if I go back to the meeting minutes index page, you see now we have 2 bullets instead of 1. This list here is a %search. It is an embedded search that formats the page output as a bullet. Another example is a change request. So the meeting minutes application is something very bare bone, very simple. Let's look at a little bit more advanced. Here we have a change request application. Same idea, but here we have a table instead of bullets. So each table row basically represents some data from a page, from a Twiki page. So requested by, assigned to, priority. So if I go into this change request here, you see that we have here on top the free-form text. At the bottom we have this classification. So if I edit the page here and assigned to, oops, if I change something, change priority here. So you've seen now on top the free-form data and at the bottom the form. If I go back to the change request index page, you see that change request 1001 is now assigned to me. Okay, then we have a plugin API. So plugins basically enhance the functionality of Twiki. One example is a spreadsheet plugin. So this syntax here, that's regular Twiki syntax how to create a table. Just with these pipe symbols or vertical bars, you create a table. Put it in asterisk, it will consider this as a table heading, right? That's standard Twiki feature. What we see here is a formula. This formula is now provided by this plugin. So this is live data, so this number here should be correct if there's no bug in the spreadsheet plugin. Okay, so there's well actually let's go back quickly. So we have a growing repository of plugins. Let's quickly have a look. There are over 70